palace stood tall in the evening light, its marble walls shining softly under the fading sun. Inside, the halls were quiet, but the air was heavy with fear. Word had spread that enemies were close, and even the strongest guards could not hide their nervous glances. Queen Alara walked slowly across the grand chamber, her gown trailing behind her. She carried herself with grace, but her heart was uneasy. She could see the doubt in the eyes of the men who had sworn to protect her. She wanted to believe they would stay true, yet she sensed that fear had already begun to win inside them. Outside, the sounds of battle grew louder. The crash of weapons and the shouts of soldiers echoed through the stone corridors. The guards at the doors shifted restlessly, gripping their spears but stepping back instead of forward. The queen stopped near the throne, looking at the men who had always bowed before her. Then it happened. The first enemy strike shook the palace gates, and the sound of splintering wood carried across the hall. Instead of forming a line to defend their queen, the guards broke. Panic spread like fire among them. One by one, they turned and ran, their armor clattering as they fled through side passages. Some dropped their weapons in their haste, leaving them scattered on the floor. The queen stood frozen, her heart breaking, as she watched the men she trusted vanish into the shadows. Betrayal stung deeper than the fear of death. She was alone, but not completely. In the corner of the chamber, a young soldier did not move. His name was Ethan Cross, and unlike the others, he did not run. He stepped forward, standing tall, though his hands shook slightly. "My queen," he said softly, his voice steady despite the chaos. "I will not leave you." The queen looked at him with surprise. He was not one of her high officers, not a knight with a shining title. He was only a common soldier, one whose name she barely knew, yet in this moment, he was the only one who had not abandoned her. The gates crashed again, louder, closer. Dust fell from the ceiling as the enemy pressed harder. Ethan moved to stand between the queen and the doors, gripping his sword tightly. Memories of his life flashed through his mind. He had once been a farm boy from a small village on Earth. His parents had taught him to work hard, to live with honor, to protect those who could not protect themselves. When he joined the army, he never thought he would find himself here, in a palace, standing before a queen. Yet fate had brought him to this place, and he knew what he must do. "You should run," the queen whispered, her voice trembling, but Ethan shook his head. "I made a vow when I put on this uniform," he replied. "If the others have forgotten theirs, I will not forget mine." Her eyes filled with tears, not only from fear, but from the loyalty shining in this one man. He was a stranger to her, yet he stood like a wall between her and death. The sound of footsteps thundered in the halls as the enemy drew nearer. Shadows moved across the cracks in the doors. Ethan tightened his grip and took a deep breath. He turned his head slightly toward the queen. "Stay behind me, no matter what happens." She wanted to argue, but she could not. Her guards had fled, her knights had abandoned her, and only this one soldier remained. As the gates burst open and the enemy poured in, Ethan's body became the shield. The queen watched, her heart torn between terror and awe, as he stepped forward alone to face them all. In that moment, she understood something clear and unshakable. One soldier's courage could outshine the loyalty of 100 cowards. The hall filled with the clash of steel and the cries of men. Ethan fought with every ounce of strength in his body, striking down one enemy after another. His arms ached and his chest burned, but he did not let fear guide him. Each swing of his sword was not only for his life, but for the queen standing behind him. Queen Alara stood close, her hands pressed together as she watched the fight. She had never seen such determination from a soldier. His uniform was plain, his face marked by sweat and dirt, yet he fought like he carried the strength of an entire army. The first wave of enemies fell, but more came rushing into the chamber. Ethan moved back step by step, keeping himself in front of the queen. He could feel the weight of the battle pressing down on him, but he refused to move aside. "We must leave," Ethan said quickly, his voice sharp with urgency. "They will not stop coming." "I will get you out." The queen nodded, though fear shook her heart. She wanted to tell him to run, to save himself, but the look in his eyes silenced her. It was the look of someone who had already made his choice. Ethan guided her through a narrow passage behind the throne, a hidden corridor built long ago for moments of escape. The walls were dark and damp, and their footsteps echoed softly as they hurried forward. Behind them, the sound of battle still raged, growing fainter as they went deeper into the passage. The Queen's voice broke the silence. "Why did you stay, Ethan? The others all fled, and yet you remained." Ethan did not slow his steps. "Because I gave my word," he answered simply. "A soldier's duty is to protect. I could not watch my queen fall while I still had breath in me." His words struck her deeply. So many knights had sworn loyalty with grand speeches, yet when danger came, they were the first to vanish. But this young man, a soldier with no title, had shown more honor than them all. As they reached the end of the corridor, Ethan pushed open a heavy wooden door that led to a small courtyard. The night sky stretched above them, filled with smoke and the glow of fires from the city beyond. Screams and cries echoed in the distance, a sign that the enemy had spread far beyond the palace walls. Ethan scanned the courtyard quickly, his eyes sharp. "You must keep moving. They will search for you. They'll want you alive or dead." The Queen followed him, her gown brushing against the ground, her breath unsteady. She wanted to ask where they were going, but she trusted him. In this moment, her life rested entirely in his hands. They slipped through the shadows, moving from wall to wall, careful not to be seen. Ethan kept his sword ready, his body always between the Queen and any danger. Though his heart raced, his focus never wavered. He had made a vow, and nothing would break it. As they moved into the lower streets of the city, they saw the suffering of the people. Homes burned, families fled, and the sound of crying children filled the air. The Queen's eyes filled with tears as she saw her people in such pain. She wanted to speak to them, to comfort them, but Ethan shook his head. "Not now," he whispered. "If they see you, they will be drawn to you, and the enemy will follow. You must survive first. Only then can you help them." His words were harsh but true. The Queen stayed silent, though her heart ached. Suddenly a group of enemy soldiers appeared at the far end of the street. Ethan quickly pulled the Queen into a narrow alley, pressing her gently against the wall to keep her hidden. He stepped forward, blocking her with his own body, his sword raised. The enemy passed by, their armor shining in the firelight, their voices rough and cruel. Ethan held his breath, every muscle tense, ready to fight if they saw her. The Queen's hand touched the back of his arm lightly, a silent gesture of trust. When the soldiers finally moved on, Ethan exhaled slowly. He turned back to her. "We must be faster. They're searching every corner." She looked at him, her fear slowly giving way to something else. Respect, admiration, even hope. She realized that this one man's loyalty was not only protecting her life, but also giving her the strength to keep going. And as they disappeared deeper into the night, she knew that no matter what awaited them, she was not alone. The streets were filled with smoke and fear. Flames climbed high into the sky, painting the night with red light. The Queen walked close to Ethan, her steps light but trembling. Every corner seemed dangerous, every shadow a place where enemies might wait. Ethan kept his sword in hand, his eyes moving from one side of the street to the other. He had no map, no clear path, only the thought of leading the Queen to safety. His mind raced as he searched for places to hide, for allies who might still be loyal. They passed broken homes and shattered walls, families huddled in the dark, whispering prayers, hoping to be spared from the enemy soldiers who marched through the city. Children cried softly, their mothers covering their mouths so the sound would not be heard. The Queen slowed as she saw them. Her heart broke at the sight of her people suffering. She wanted to stop, to comfort them, to tell them she was still alive. But Ethan placed a hand on her arm and shook his head. "You cannot," he whispered. "If they know you are here, it will bring danger to them. We must stay unseen." She nodded, though her heart ached. She felt the heavy weight of being a ruler, of watching her people suffer while she was forced to remain silent. A shout echoed down the street. Soldiers were searching nearby, their torches swinging, their voices loud. Ethan pulled the Queen into a ruined building, guiding her behind a fallen wall. They crouched low, hidden in the shadows. The soldiers came close, their boots heavy against the stones. Ethan pressed a finger to his lips, signaling silence. The Queen held her breath as the torches lit up the street, passing close to where they hid. For a moment, she feared they would be found. but the soldiers moved past, their voices fading into the distance. Only when the sound was gone did Ethan let out a breath. They moved again, slipping through alleys, always careful, always quiet. But soon they came across a group of townsfolk who had not fled. Men and women stood together, clutching whatever tools or weapons they could find. When they saw the queen, their eyes widened with shock and hope. "Our queen," one of them whispered. The queen wanted to speak, but Ethan stepped forward first. "Be silent," he urged. "The enemy is near. If you wish to live, you must move quietly." But the people pressed closer. "You have not abandoned us," a woman said, her voice shaking with tears. "We thought you were gone." The queen looked into their faces, filled with fear, yet also with a small light of hope. She could not turn away, though Ethan frowned. She placed a hand gently on his arm and stepped forward. "I am still here," she said softly, "and I will not leave you. Together we will endure this night." Her words were quiet, but they carried strength. The people straightened their backs, their fear lessened by the sound of her voice. Ethan saw the change and knew that she was right to speak. Even in hiding, her presence gave her people courage. More joined them as they moved through the city, a small group forming around the queen and her lone guard. Though they had little to fight with, they found courage in Ethan's steady steps and the queen's calm voice. As they reached a narrow bridge, the group paused. On the far side, enemy soldiers marched, their armor shining in the firelight. The way ahead was blocked. Ethan raised his sword. "Stay behind me," he told the queen and the people. "I'll clear the way." The queen placed her hand on his shoulder. "You cannot do this alone." He looked at her, his eyes steady. "I must try. Your life is worth more than mine." Before she could answer, the enemy soldiers saw them and raised their weapons. The night filled with the sound of steel and shouting. Ethan stepped forward, his sword flashing, his body once again the wall between the queen and death. The people watched in awe. Some, inspired by his bravery, lifted their tools and joined the fight. What began as a desperate flight turned into the first spark of resistance, and as the queen saw her people stand beside the soldier who refused to leave her, she realized that courage could spread like fire. The bridge shook with the weight of battle. The sound of swords striking rang through the night, and the cries of men filled the air. Ethan fought at the front, his body the barrier that stood between the queen and the soldiers. His arms grew heavy, his breath harsh, but he did not step back. Queen Alara stayed close behind him, her heart pounding as she watched his struggle. She had never seen such courage, not from her knights, not from her generals. His uniform was stained, his hands cut and bruised, yet he stood tall against every strike. The townsfolk, who had followed in fear, now looked at him with new eyes. His courage lit something inside them. One by one, they stepped forward. A farmer lifted a broken axe. A young man raised a hammer. A woman gripped a wooden staff. They began to fight beside Ethan, shouting not in fear, but in defiance. The enemy pressed hard, their numbers great, but the spirit of the people began to grow. Every time Ethan struck, another found the courage to strike as well. The queen's voice rang out above the clash of steel. "Stand firm, my people," she cried. "This is our home. We will not surrender it." Her words carried strength. The people shouted with her, and their voices rose into the night. The bridge that had been a place of fear became a place of hope. Yet the enemy was not weak. They pushed with force, driving Ethan and the people back step by step. Ethan felt pain burn across his side as a blade cut through his armor, stumbled, but the queen's voice called out to him, and he pushed forward again. Blood ran down his arm, his body trembling, but his spirit did not bend. He thought of the farm where he had grown up, of the fields and the quiet mornings. He thought of his parents who had taught him to live with honor, and he thought of the queen behind him who trusted him with her life. Those thoughts gave him strength. The townsfolk formed a line, fighting as one. Though they lacked training, they had courage, and courage carried them forward. Together they pushed back, holding the bridge against the enemy's weight. The queen stepped among them, not with a weapon, but with words that gave power. She called each person by name when she could, reminding them that they were not alone. Her presence lifted their hearts, and they fought harder, their fear replaced with fire. The battle stretched long into the night. Torches fell, sparks flew, and the river below roared with the sound of water and steel. Ethan's strength began to fade, but still he stood, his sword moving slower, yet still finding its mark. Finally, the enemy surged once more, stronger than before. Ethan placed himself directly in front of the queen, his body already marked with wounds. He raised his sword, though his arms felt like stone. "You will not touch her," he said, his voice hoarse but firm. The enemy laughed, but as they stepped forward, the people surged too. Farmers, bakers, mothers, and sons threw themselves into the fight, pushing with all they had. Inspired by Ethan's stand and the queen's words, they refused to yield. The clash shook the bridge, the cries grew louder, and the fight burned hotter. Ethan could no longer feel his wounds, only the fire in his heart. He struck again and again, each swing carrying the weight of his vow. The queen's eyes never left him. She saw his pain, his courage, his unbreakable will. Tears filled her eyes, but her voice stayed strong, calling her people to fight on. And though the enemy pressed with greater numbers, they could not break the wall made of one soldier's body and the courage he had given to others. The bridge did not fall that night. As the stars watched from above, the queen realized that even if her kingdom was in flames, hope still lived. And it burned brightest in the heart of the soldier who refused to let her fall. The night dragged on, and the bridge became a place of blood and sweat. Bodies lay still on the stones, torches burned low, and the sound of clashing steel faded as the enemy finally pulled back. The people who stood with Ethan and the queen gasped for breath, their hands trembling, but their hearts still burning with courage. Ethan leaned on his sword, his body heavy with wounds. His legs shook, and his vision blurred, but he did not fall. He turned his head to see the queen, and for a moment, relief crossed his face. She was alive. That was enough for him. The queen hurried to his side, her gown stained with dust and ash. She placed her hand on his arm, guiding him to sit against the stone wall. Her eyes filled with tears as she saw the cuts across his chest, the blood soaking his uniform. "You have done more than any soldier I have ever known," she whispered, her voice breaking. Ethan tried to smile, though his lips were pale. "I only did my duty," he said softly. "Your life is worth more than mine. If I had to choose again, I would do the same." The townsfolk gathered around them. Some tended to their own wounds, others looked out over the bridge, waiting for the next wave of enemies, but no more came. The sound of horns echoed in the distance, not of the enemy but of loyal forces arriving from nearby lands. Reinforcements had come at last. The queen lifted her head as she heard the horns. Hope shone in her eyes. Her people had not been forgotten. The loyal soldiers pushed through the streets, driving the enemy back. The city, though broken, would not fall that night. But her joy was mixed with sorrow as she looked back at Ethan. His breathing was weak, each breath shorter than the last. She knelt beside him, holding his hand tightly. "You cannot leave us," she said, her voice trembling. "Your courage saved me, saved all of us. I need you to stay." Ethan's eyes met hers, calm and steady, despite the pain. "My queen," he said, his voice no more than a whisper, "you will not be alone. Your people have seen your strength tonight. They will follow you. They will rise with you. My part is done." Tears fell down her cheeks, but she did not look away. She wanted to hold him, to keep him here, but she knew his body had given all it could. Ethan's gaze drifted upward to the stars shining faintly through the smoke. He remembered the fields of his childhood, the sound of the wind, the warmth of his mother's voice. He carried those memories with him as he closed his eyes. His final breath left his lips, and his hand grew still in the queen's grasp. Silence hung heavy over the group. The townsfolk bowed their heads, honoring the man who had stood when others had fled. The queen rose slowly, her face pale, but her eyes shining with a fierce light. She looked at her people, at the men and women who had fought beside the soldier. "He gave his life for me," she said, her voice steady, though her heart was breaking. "But more than that, he gave his courage to us all. We will not let his sacrifice be forgotten. From this night on, we will stand together. No enemy will break us, because his spirit lives in each of us." The people shouted in agreement, their voices echoing across the bridge. Their grief turned into strength, their sorrow into resolve. They lifted their weapons high, not as broken villagers, but as defenders of their queen and their land. The reinforcements arrived, sweeping the remaining enemy from the city. Dawn came at last, the fires fading, the sky painted with the soft light of morning. The palace still stood, scarred but unbroken, just as the queen and her people now stood. In the days that followed, songs were sung of the night when the guards fled. But one soldier stayed. Name, Ethan Cross, was carried from village to village, a symbol of loyalty and sacrifice. Children would grow up hearing his story, learning that true strength came not from titles or crowns, but from courage and honor. The queen often stood at the palace balcony, looking out over her city. She ruled with wisdom and compassion, her heart forever marked by the memory of the soldier who had given everything to protect her. And though time passed and seasons changed, the story never faded. The people remembered not the fear, not the flames, but the man who stood when all others ran. His body had shielded their queen, but his courage had shielded them all.